Besides wind dispersal, which is our standard abiotic dispersal, there are lots of cases of animal dispersal. And this is a case of animal dispersal on the outside of an animal. So they have specialized terms for if an animal is dispersing your seeds inside of its body by eating, that's a different kind of dispersal than this case where the seeds are being dispersed on the outside of an animal. And just looking at a lot of these different images, you can see some convergence on a theme where if you have stiff hairs with hooks on them, this is a common strategy in plants to grab onto something that is furry. So lots of furry animals out in nature walking all over the place. And if you can grab onto their fur, then you hitch a ride for a certain distance until, in a lot of cases, they might notice that you're on their fur and groom you off. And at that point, you have been dispersed. So external animal dispersal and lots of cases here of fruit modification. So another case of the rose family here. This is a modified style, not feathery in this case, but stiff and hooked at the end in this genus Geum. Here's one, fruits in Apiaceae, Rubiaceae, Boraginaceae, Onagraceae. Look at them go. Kind of the dart-looking spear kind of things here in bidens. A lot of these you might have experience of picking them out of your clothing or picking them off of your dog's fur. These are modifications to fruits. So a lot of times fruit modified into a long stiff portion is modification of the style. In other cases, these are modifications of hairs. So these are more like surface hairs in Apiaceae, surface hairs Onagraceae, surface hairs in this Gallium, surface hairs Hakelia. Maybe a little more common than we have modified style here. And then this is, I guess also, I'm not sure which part on the bidens there. Accessory tissue as well can be modified into these stiff hooked hairs. So on the left here, member of Rosaceae, this has part of the hypanthium, the fused portion on the outside of this flower, has some hairs that are stiff and hooked. And then this one may be the most classic, the burdock, genus Arctium. These are filaries of an Asteraceae plant. And so they're individually stiff and hooked, but because they're not associated with individual flowers, that makes them accessory tissue. And inside of this ball of overlapping filaries are achenes, proper as would belong to Asteraceae. Some fruits are I'd say just not easy to describe as how they get around. So here we've got some cases of, sometimes you see them as just gravity dispersed, which is really inelegant. Just drop on the ground, bonk, and roll downhill or maybe get blown around a little bit on the surface. To be honest, I don't always know. It's not always clear how these get around. Sometimes they're stashed by animals that hoard them and they germinate there. Sometimes they really do just kind of fall to the ground in the local environment. If you're living in a good environment for your species, it might help you to just keep putting plants into that same environment. They might disperse a little bit away from the plant that produced them, and maybe that's okay. So I'd say these they don't have a fun story to go along with them. They don't appear to have any modifications, but that's not to say that they couldn't get fairly far away. A couple of these you would find in wetlands. The rice plants are wetland plants. The Sparganium burr reed is a wetland plant. They could stand to be dispersed by water in their local environment. So maybe you could research one of these, see where the seeds end up. So individually, these are fruits that are dispersing without any real specialized modifications. Then also we've got some seeds that basically drop to the ground. No clear modifications for how those seeds get around. Again, sort of gravity dispersal. We have dry dehiscent fruits producing these in this case. And just a little note that sometimes there really is more than just gravity getting these around. Sometimes there's some interesting processes you don't think about until you research them more carefully. The one in the upper left, this is a violet. This is one we actually have around here. This is a yellow wood violet. And it does this thing where as the fruits are maturing, these are the seeds and they've already dehisced out of this fruit that breaks into 3 components. But then the walls of the fruit, they kind of squeeze and shoot these little seeds out. And I've got a video of a different one here on the left, on the right. This one builds up pressure as it's drying, and then it finally kind of snaps open and shoots some seeds out. So sometimes, even though the fruits aren't modified, they don't appear to be modified, they don't have wings or anything like that. Sometimes they do this ejection seed dispersal. I suggested this before. Sometimes animals are big onto collecting fruits or seeds and sticking them into caches. C-A-C-H-E is a cache. So seed caching animals, they have a behavior where they collect up foods and they store it. And sometimes, similar to pollination, not all the pollen makes it where it needs to go. In that case, in the case of seeds, you can get a lot of seeds that maybe many of them get eaten, but if a few of them don't get eaten, get dropped along the way, or maybe get forgotten about in one of these caches, they can germinate there, and that is effectively dispersing those seeds as well. So lots of processes, lots going on kind of secretly beneath the surface that's worth knowing about. So as I suggested a couple times, you can research how far your seeds get from the plant that produced them. And a couple of graphs here that are useful for comparison, how these different seeds get around. So unassisted, maybe that gravity dispersal, mean dispersal distance, not very far. So on meters, this is 10 centimeters or 100 centimeters away from the plant. Not very far from the plant that produced them. Ballistic, so launching them out, ants, wind, and then it kind of goes up sort of gradually. This is a logarithmic scale, so this is a pretty substantial jump up to 100 meters, 1,000 meters here by one we haven't talked about yet, seeds being ingested by animals, so transporting inside of animals. So as you might guess, the ones that are more take advantage of vectors that move them farther are going to get farther. And then this one is just kind of a general pattern where seeds that go farther actually tend to be bigger. It's kind of a counterintuitive maybe if you think that small seeds are going to go farther. I would be surprised by that myself. Just overall might be a measure of investment in the mechanisms that are going to transport those seeds. So general pattern, one we typically see is this so-called seed shadow, where if you find a plant that produces the seeds, that'll be at the 0 distance. Seeds mostly fall very close to where they were produced, and then fewer and fewer of them, a small number of them make it far away, and more of them stay close to the plant that produced them. And this is common really across, I think, all of the different dispersal strategies. So whether you're being dispersed by an animal, by the wind, whatever it is, it's more likely that you're not going to go very far. But that's okay. So being close to the plant that made you means that you're probably starting in a pretty suitable habitat. And then going farther away, maybe an uncertain habitat, but maybe a better chance of getting somewhere that your species hasn't been yet.